But could you imagine all of a sudden you're training one of these Gen AIs with proprietary information and it's training their model. And the next thing you know, one of your big competitors says, hey, what is E360's secret sauce? And the Gen AI is going to be happy to oblige and give all the information that it now has because it was just given freely and then used to train. Hey, everybody, I'm Brad Bussie, Chief Information Security Officer here at E360. Thank you for joining me for the State of Enterprise IT Security Edition. This is the show that makes IT security approachable and actionable for technology leaders. Joining me again for second episode is Aaron Carpenter, our Senior Digital Marketing Director at E360. Aaron, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Brad. It is a pleasure to be back. I had so much fun last time, and I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, a lot of people liked the back and forth that we had because I think we've got some good perspectives across markets, and I think that's what is interesting for a lot of our listeners and viewers. So I thought we would talk about a couple of different things today, and this is pretty exciting because Erin has some live information that she's going to share. Now, it may not be as exciting if you are listening, so I would urge you to go and take a look at this on YouTube or one of the other channels where you can actually watch, because we're going to pull up some live demos of things, and we're going to be talking about AI. So I was recently at Black Hat, and everybody was asking me, Brad, where's the Black Hat update? What are all the things that you learned? And I thought we would take a little bit of a different approach, because what we're going to talk about today does play back into some of the things that I did learn at Black Hat. I think one of the most important things being no one's really got it figured out yet from a security standpoint. And a lot of the things that we've shared on the podcast over the past year are pretty much where the experts are at as well. So today I figured we would talk about a very real topic, which is shadow AI and how to handle this within a company, because everyone is starting to leverage AI in one way or another. Some are pretty beginner with the use cases, others are far more advanced. And as a cyber professional, that can be a little scary on both spectrums. We're going to go through an exercise, I promised this a minute ago, where Aaron is going to walk through something that I found exciting when we were talking about the show, where we take some of our Gen AIs that are out there and we pit them against each other with some information. It's some dummy data that we created to show some of the power of the Gen AIs. And then I'm going to talk about how, from a security perspective, I would want to either govern that or control what is even able to be put up there in the first place. And then Aaron was going to talk a little bit about how AI is being used in everyday applications now from a marketing perspective. And the kind of the relationship that we have in, she wants to make sure that the marketing data and the things that are being put into any of the AIs that we use are following the right security protocols and standards. And, before we do anything, it's typically, hey, Brad, can we do this? Which I love, but there also needs to be a piece of it where somebody tries to upload something and it just says, no, that's against company policy. It needs to be a blend. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So Aaron, I thought maybe we could start by talking a little bit about that shadow AI in organizations, because I think this is a topic that you've heard pretty often as well, because I feel like everybody's just trying to figure out what they can do with this great new, two-letter word AI. And And I thought maybe we could highlight a couple things there. What do you think of that?
Brad, I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
So go ahead.
no, one of the things you said at the beginning pertained to Black Hat when you were there, and you mentioned how a lot of these security leaders are still trying to figure it out. And that's fascinating because that mirrors a lot of what I'm hearing in the marketing community. Even since I've been following this and using AI actively since November 22nd, and everyone agrees that we are still this is still in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
We are still in the early innings. And that also precipitated the need for you and I to talk about this as well. And one thing that I recognized is the dynamics between security leaders, marketing leaders, and other functional department leaders is probably changing and evolving and needs to be tighter than ever before. I can only speak from a marketing perspective at this moment, but the fact that you and I are connecting and I'm checking with you really shows me that we really have to have a tight alliance. And
Yeah.
then there has to be a level of education to the leaders so that you don't become a bottleneck as well. So we're empowered both in advance, but then also, and I know you're going to speak to some of the measures on the back end, not on the back end, but after something has been implemented to make
Yeah.
sure that we're following the proper governance protocols.
Yeah. And I have been called, unfortunately, a bottleneck before, especially when it comes to introducing not just like a Gen AI into the business, but an artificial intelligence, an augmented intelligence, if you will, that is going to do something pretty specific with data. And this was a place that I was actually a bit of a bottleneck for E360, because one of the things that I've noticed about organizations in general is they're typically not ready for an AI implementation that has to do with their data, because their data isn't properly classified, it isn't properly tagged. And when those two things aren't present, and I unleash this super fast indexing mechanism that's going to do correlation, causation, and all of these great things with the data set, what's to stop any user, or really anyone at all, from asking that AI a question through a prompt, which is kind of what we're all being trained to do now with all of these different AIs, is just talk to it like a person, ask it the things, set the stage. If I don't have any guardrails, how is it supposed to know that maybe it it shouldn't give somebody information that is HR sensitive, or it's PII, or it's just something about a user that's protected by HIPAA or protected by any number of privacy concerns. So these are the kinds of things that I'm seeing when we start talking about the implementations. And one of the things that I'm going back to is a term that we used to call back in the day shadow IT, where you would have people in an organization that were generally in a business unit, and they would either ask IT for something and not get it, and then they would just go and do it themselves, or they wouldn't even think that IT would need to be involved. It's just an application after all, and they can put it on their credit card. And next thing you know, you've got 500 applications that your user base is using, that as a security professional or in IT, you know nothing about it. We're experiencing something very similar when it comes to AI and Gen AI, because we can name a couple, whether it is Gemini, Chat GPT, Claude. We're actually going to look at Claude today, which is pretty interesting, some of the things that Anthropic is doing. And what ends up happening is, before you know it, your user base is using a wide range. I see this a lot too on personal devices. That's a different show. We're not going to go too crazy into that. We'll just talk about some of the things that in a corporate environment, like what I would expect to see with something like that is some controls around which ones are possible to use. And back in the day, when we were doing this for IT, we implemented a technology that was called CASB. So it's like a cloud access security broker, and we're limiting, in a lot of cases, what applications can be visited in the first place to even be signed up for. It would have to go through IT in order to have an exception or to set up single sign-on, all those kinds of things. So I am looking for that now for all of the different Gen AIs, and it is possible through technology. Whether it is one that I add to a browser as an extension that watches the traffic and where I'm going, and then it will limit what kind of information I can upload, because that's what everybody's concerned with. I talked about the data security a second ago about information coming back, but could you imagine all of a sudden you're training one of these Gen AIs with proprietary information, and it's training their model, and the next thing you know, one of your big competitors says, hey, what is E360's secret sauce? And the Gen AI is going to be happy to oblige and give all the information that it now has, because it was just given freely and then used to train. Now, there's ways, depending on your licensing, to prevent those kinds of things from happening, but it has to be intentful. And I'm finding that users typically just go with what's free and with what's easy, and those have the least amount of protections. So as a CISO, I have to protect people from themselves often, and they don't even realize it's a problem, but it is. So what I've implemented, and a lot of, I'd say a lot of our clients do something similar. It's either a browser extension that does the things that I was just talking about, or through a secure access service edge, so through SASE. If you've got a client on your endpoint, almost all the SASE providers are doing this now, where I can say, I only want my organization to use Gemini, or I only want my organization to be able to use ChatGPT. So when I try to go to Claude, or I try to go somewhere else, I get a challenge back from the proxy that says, you're not authorized. If you think that this was a mistake, why don't you go ahead and click submit here, give us a reason. It goes to IT and security, and then we can make a judgment call. So those two gates, I think, are important for organizations, and that is helping to curb some of these things that are potentially happening with Gen AIs and organizations.
Yeah, good context. And that also adds, puts some onus on you to be up to speed on some of the latest models too. Because let's say you block access to Claude, boy, I would be bummed.
Yeah. So would
You
I,
know?
after seeing some of the stuff that it can do through your
Right,
demo that we had earlier. I was like, wow, that's pretty legit. Some of the things
right.
the audience is going to see today. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Cool. Well, I mean, I think whether or not someone's an elementary user of AI or an advanced one, the long and the short of it is almost everyone's using it,
Yeah.
and protections need to be in place.
Yeah. Well, and I see marketing using it more than a lot of individuals. I see those that are having to crunch numbers or large pieces of data or compare and contrast. And I think some of the commercials that we're seeing on TV are, and I know I sound like a super old dude when I said that, because I'm sure a lot of people are like, what's a TV? I just look at the stuff on my phone. But basically, we're seeing this from Microsoft, where with Copilot, they're saying, well, you can just take this 150-page of data, ingest it into Copilot, and then say, I want you to create a presentation from this. It's going to be 10 slides, blah, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then it spits out this beautiful PowerPoint. But I think, Aaron, what you have done, showing me some of these data sets, has really gone into what is possible. But the fact that you do need a little bit of knowledge on how to prompt, you have to get your data set primed. There's some upfront things that you have to do. that aren't necessarily as easy or as intuitive, but once you do it, I think there's something to talk about. So I'd love to go through that use case. I think you had a pretty cool demo of some of these data sets and how you can do different things with the Gen AIs that are available. I think we picked two at random and decided to show like the art of possible. And then what I would say is after I would give just a little bit of what I as a security leader would insert or expect based on what you're showing me.
Yeah, let's do it. And before I go into that, two things I want to mention. So as a business user using AI actively, and I got this from Paul Reitzer, who's the head of the Marketing Intelligence Institute. If you think of your job as a collection of tasks and you start to evaluate them and compartmentalize them and think about how AI can advance either of those, any of those, that's how you can think about making your job more efficient and advanced rather than, start to end. So, and there are even evaluations that you can perform to see, hey, this usually would take me 3 hours. Well, I can shorten it to 1 hour, or I don't know, 10 minutes, something like that. So if you do that, I also think then you can think of it as AI is a way to get you to where you need to faster. The other thing to keep in mind is it helps to know what good looks like. If you start with the end in mind, that helps you become better at prompting. And I think that's where someone who is a little bit more experienced in whatever work they're doing will have a better time using it because they'll know how to guide the AI just like they're guiding an intern.
I love that. And that makes me think of so many people that are saying AI is going to take my job.
Right.
And it really makes me go to, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we
Mm.
truly have an artificial intelligence. We have augmented intelligence. And the only reason it's going to take your job is because somebody else knows how to use it better than you do.
That's it. And honestly, that's my point of view is someone who is a little bit more experienced in their role. I know I said this already. As long as you're willing to get in there, try, you actually might be more advantaged because you're going to get to where you need to faster. It's not like someone just walking into the workforce who might be super tech savvy is advantaged, not necessarily because they're new at the role and they don't even know where to start. It's like a blank canvas for them.
Right.
So don't be afraid, even though we're a couple of years into this, and as far as when ChatGPT came on the scene, don't be afraid to tinker. All right. Are we ready to set up this demo?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. We are going to start with a dummy data set that I obtained from a fabulous company called Refine Labs. So this is example data. What you're seeing right here is so let me just back up. This is going to be a use case that's something that someone in marketing might want to use. They're going to look at a set of data and they want to perform an analysis, perhaps create some charts that they want to report up to the C level to demonstrate performance. So what this sheet of data demonstrates is source of opportunities, source of pipeline by pipeline by source, whether it's cold outbound, low intent lead gen, ABM intent. And a marketing leader might want to demonstrate that, hey, low intent lead gen, which is what a lot of people are forced to do, really isn't that impactful if you're actually looking at pipeline. While it might generate a lot of leads in volume, when it really comes down to pipeline, it's very inefficient. All right. Getting
For
deep into the
those,
marketing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for those of us that aren't marketing,
Sorry.
what is ABM? No, I mean, I'm sure somebody's like, ABM, what is ABM?
Account-based marketing.
Ah,
So yeah. So at the end of the day, it's doing marketing well, and when focused on a big account with a buying committee and attacking it from multiple angles. Okay.
cool.
All right. So there are a couple of sheets of interest. This is a pipeline source report. And then this is a report that breaks down the pipeline by a point of conversion. So when those leads came in, did they come in from gated content? That's content with a form, content syndication, events. So what was the point of conversion for those channels? And if you want to analyze them and derive some insights, that could take a marketing analyst. It could also be assisted or augmented, as you say, Brad, by AI. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to test it with ChatGPT. I'm using the ChatGPT team, so it is a more advanced form of the model. And then we're going to do an experiment with Claude. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, first thing, I'm going to give it a prompt. I'm going to say, you are a marketing leader analyzing a report, a pipeline source report, and preparing the data for the C-level. Generate some reports along with a summary analysis. It's kind of redundant. And recommended action steps in a manner that the board would appreciate. Okay, so I put my prompt in there, and now what I'm going to do is I'm taking a screenshot here. I'm going to do one screenshot. Oh, hang on a second. There's one more thing. Okay, there are two reports here. One reflects the overall pipeline source. ChatGPT doesn't really care if I misspell either.
That's good. It straightens it out. Yeah.
The other reflects opportunities by point of conversion. All right, so I took one screenshot, and then I'm going to go to the split the funnel analysis. And honestly, the more context you give it, the better. I didn't give it a lot of guidance, but what you're going to see are two screenshots side by side. I am going to, because this is going to bother me, I'm going to copy and paste that prompt.
I love like the character recognition that it can do in OCR. So, because like for probably most people watching and listening, they're like, boy, I probably would have done a CSV file, or I've done this before with CSV. But with a lot of these Gen AIs now, it's like a screenshot, and it's going to recognize where the columns are, where the rows are, what the header is. It's getting pretty useful for just screenshots and other things.
Oh yeah, and I've leveraged that so much when I needed to. Sometimes I need to put something in a spreadsheet that's in a table format, and I'll take a screenshot and I'll say, put this in a table, and then I'll copy and paste the table, and it's in there. In the past, you'd have to manually copy paste every single cell or type it.
You know what's wild is it still hasn't gotten very good at, like, if you're trying to have it create a video or create a like a picture, and there's any text in there, even if you tell it what the text is supposed to say, it comes out jumbled symbols. I mean, like different language looking, even though you said, hey, I want you to say this exact thing, it's still not there yet.
It's not there. It's practically creating hieroglyphics when it does it.
Yes.
Okay, so it created a nice analysis here, which, you know, this is where I would want to review and make sure the data. I would cherry pick it a little bit here. I'd spot check to make sure the data points were right. This might even be more wordy than I want, and I would ask it to synthesize it. The one piece that it is missing here, and I'm gonna push it a little further. I want it to create some visualizations. Now generate some visualizations of this data. ChatGPT first branded this as code interpreter. I believe it was July of 2023. And thankfully, they rebranded it into data analytics or something like that, and just rolled it up into the overall ChatGPT 4.0. Yeah. So what it's doing now, it's analyzing that same data, and it's going to hopefully create some reports. Might be a pie chart, line chart. Go ahead.
Well, and I'd say while it's doing this, if I were looking at this from what would I want to see as a security professional, you said the first thing that I would want to see, which is the version of ChatGPT that you're using, because it's like a segmented off piece of the OpenAI models, where it doesn't use any data that's put there for training the model. So there's different licensing structures. We don't have to get into that, but that's the first thing I would want to see. And second is, if I were concerned about PII, like if any of this data, those screenshots that you had taken, any of that, what's nice is a lot of the browser plugins, as well as some of the SASE technology, it will actually do the exact same thing, but it's going to look at that text before it lands in ChatGPT. So it would look and say, there's a social security number in here, or there's an employee, there's something that it identifies the employee, or some of that marketing data contains sensitive information, and it would actually prevent you from even hitting enter to submit it. And it would pop a box that said, you need to delete these because it's detected some of those things. So obviously having a policy is the good first start, but protecting us from ourselves, you need some tooling in there as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I really, all I know is that ChatGPT team says that all of the data stays secure within here. Now, with that said, I've checked with you on it, Brad, and I still would not put sensitive data in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everything is still anonymized. Oh,
Thank you for that. Because I mean, I've read their privacy and kind of their whole implementation. It looks good on paper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just more of that, like, trust but verify kind of person. And if we can prevent some of those things from getting out in the first place, unless you absolutely have to do that kind of a thing for your organization, then I would just want the PII redacted. And if I couldn't do that, then I would suggest a private version or your own GPT, where then there is no way of kind of cross contaminating. It's all in your own infrastructure and things like that. So then I would be okay with it, but there's a lot of ifs, then else's that need to happen before that.
Oh yeah. Well, and that would probably require an enterprise level version. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a whole other ball of wax, but I
totally.
understand why it's important. Okay, so here's what it came up with, which is interesting.
That's
Uh, yeah, I mean, this is not what it showed last time. And of course, you can tell it to iterate. If this is not what you want to see, I'd rather see a bar chart or a pie chart. So if you look here, we tested this earlier. You can see some of the visualizations it created right here.
And this, yeah, this all goes into the way it's prompted, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I have both seen, I say this, and then I'm going to ask it the same thing tomorrow, and it may interpret based on some of the other things that I've talked about between then and that point in time, and it may do something different. So it really is like talking to a person a lot of the time, where we are fairly inconsistent.
Oh, absolutely. But you'll see here, it actually turned that screenshot into a table before it actually turned it into a chart.
Wow.
All right. We are going to take this prompt and now we're going to hop over to our good friend Claude. Oh, I got to go back to the beginning because you want to see it from the beginning. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to prompt it, copy and paste. The only thing different in this prompt, I actually took the prompt that I tested earlier, is I asked it to create an interactive dashboard. Spoiler alert, Claude, ever since they released Sonnet 3.5, about probably 3.5 weeks ago, ironically, there's a feature in it called artifacts. And if you turn it on, it's allowed to, it enables it to create this interactive dashboard. ChatGPT 4.0 cannot do that. So that's why I added it here.
I was blown away. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm stealing the thunder.
Oh, there is no, it is a whole thunderstorm here. So there's nothing to steal.
So cool.
All right. Split the funnel. I'm lazy. So I'm going to do 2 screenshots right here. Oh, go back to our friend Claude. Again, Claude lets us add multiple screenshots. One thing I've noticed is if you're uploading CSV files or certain data, you may run into limitations in terms of the context window and what you can put in. So those are some limiting factors. This screenshot's fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. This is so freaking cool. Look at this.
Wow.
I am not even a programmer, not even close.
Your friend Claude looks pretty proficient.
That's it. I mean, it looks good. We'll have to talk to some of our engineers to make sure this is right, but
Yeah, I'd have to dust off some of the way back to read this.
right? All right, so here we go. Total revenue 17 mil, opportunities 9175, win rate 8.58%. And remember, I wanted it to create an interactive dashboard. Look at that. Yes, it's interactive. I can click some buttons and toggle between. Done a really, really great job of creating a visualization that's helpful. Here's the analysis, recommended action steps, and I could go through those. And then I can actually even publish this if I want. I can download it to a file and off we go. I can even tell it to change the data around, eliminate something, create a different visualization. You get the idea. So,
Yeah, it makes me wonder how long they're going to let data live interactive like this, if there's going to be a limit, because I think some of this could get pretty big, and depending on how an org uses it, if they're having others manipulate the data, visit the data, things like that, they almost become a hosting company at that point. So I wonder if there's going to be like, this is only going to live for a certain amount of time, and then it'll have to regenerate, and well, it'll be interesting to see how these artifacts are used. And I, as you know, as a security professional, I'm looking at some of this stuff going, this is great, but what are the different controls that we have around it to make sure the data stays where it's supposed to, and all that kind of
oh,
stuff.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at, I don't know if it's the actual terms, but Claude says that it's the sensitive data is not training the model. That's, hey, Brad, is this right? I keep coming back to you. And oh, hey, quick caveat with this particular feature. This is using the $20 a month feature. So Claude is still excellent at the free level. It will not, to my knowledge, do these artifacts. But I mean, the amount of time saved, and as a marketing leader to be able to say, yep, that validates exactly what I need to show the board. Low intent lead gen. This is not why we're not paying companies to do lead gen of white papers, because they don't create to a strong win rate.
That's yeah, that's
It's a
amazing.
waste. It's a waste of money. So,
Yeah,
okay. I mean, that can be repurposed for any department, really. There's
right.
so many incredible insights. Look how fast I was able to get to that conclusion. Perhaps take a screenshot of this and put it into my monthly marketing report.
Exactly. Yeah, and just imagine if you had to depend on somebody to do this for you. The savings of time, and just I think it's forcing people to stretch a little bit in their career, and helping them to grow in a way that I don't think a lot of us thought we would. I know a lot of marketing professionals now that are quasi IT in a lot of things that they're doing, especially with the applications. And I think having a good understanding of like integrations, integrating something between HubSpot and something else, and how to use Zapier with that being middleware, and like it does all the translations. That's like generally IT level stuff. But yeah, it's pretty interesting having conversations with marketing professionals. They're like, oh yeah, this is how you set up the connector. There's an API and you do this, and this. I'm like, do you want a job? Because we're a
Yeah,
little short-handed in cyber and
right.
IT in general, and I think we could use some help.
You know what? That's actually that's funny to hear you say that. That's actually a really good segue as you're talking about Zapier and middleware, because I actually have done that to some extent, where I've connected data from Google Sheets with something else and created actions, and it actually does plug in to the API of Open API,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and it can create, it can use ChatGPT to generate actions based on a prompt that's programmed. So that is one application that has AI infused. Every single, and pretty much every single application, if it wants to live to see the light of day in a year, is going to have that if it's not natively
That's right.
AI. So what do we do? Can I use it? Can I not? What do I prompt it with? I mean, HubSpot has AI built right in. All of them do. So what do we think about as business users, and then as security leaders? How do we guide people with these applications?
Yeah, I think middleware, because generally what they're doing is they're kind of becoming the broker between everything. And if you insert API security into that, that's generally where I would want to see it as a security professional. I would want to see that APIs are secure, you're using the right type of authentication and authorization, and that you're using zero trust principles, which a lot of these middlewares like Zapier, they're doing that to a certain extent, but that's where you have to plug in the whole application security stack. So it's still tool intensive. There are a lot of different kinds that, if as a listener or somebody who's watching, if you're kind of interested in what we're talking about, if you go and look at Apogee, or you go and look at No Name Security, a couple like that, you'll start to get a sense for API security and why it's so important, because that really is where all of these connectors are going, and how they're talking to things. Now, when I'm looking at an application, so let's say it is HubSpot and it's got its own GPT interface or its own artificial intelligence kind of interface. Generally, what they're doing is kind of what we've talked about, but they're doing it with the data that they have access to. So things that you've already uploaded and exist inside of HubSpot, that's where you can say, can create that cool dashboard for me based on the customers that I have inside. So it's indexing data and it's doing all the cool things of correlation, and then it's displaying it. Some of them do go out and allow a connection with the not external data source. Those are the ones you need to look out for. And those are the ones that I'm not a big fan of, where they'll try to augment the data that they have with something on the internet or to an external data source of some kind. So they're trying to enrich the information. And that's where data security for me comes into play. So read pretty closely in the agreements that you have with your applications, because all of them now have like an AI clause where they talk about what they're using, how it's using your information, and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, Aaron, pretty much everybody's doing this. When I walked the floor at Black Hat, I couldn't walk 2 feet without bumping into AI. And it was like, even if you weren't an AI company, you were a security platform that was powered by AI or able to do something new and exciting. Less people, because we do, like you just demonstrated, creating those dashboards and things like that. Maybe that used to be a person and you don't need that person anymore. That's not the case most of the time, because that person that was building those is probably now your prompt person, the person that's going in and knows more about these Gen AIs than anybody else. So I think I'm seeing more of that than like complete displacement. But you're right. Most organizations and applications that have an AI component to them, it's mainly living inside of the data they already have and just making your interface with them that much better, faster. And I see that in like a security operations center is a good kind of a good security use case, where instead of building a playbook by hand, now I can go into my SOAR solution inside of that operations security operations center, and I can say, I'm trying to do the following things with this data to prevent the following, and you give it this big long prompt, and next thing you know, you have a playbook that you can go in and then ingest that into the organization. So that to me is pretty exciting. And all of these different applications, I think, are doing pretty fun and exciting and interesting things with Gen AI. We just need to be careful how they're using the data and make sure that we as consumers understand the way in which that data is being used.
Wow. Sounds like we have a lot of exciting upcoming episodes around this as it evolves, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and like never let go of one of the models and one of the applications. I mean, I keep testing them because it keeps changing.
it does. It definitely does.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much all we wanted to cover for today. Anything
Yeah,
else?
absolutely. And I want to throw this out to anyone who's listening, if they are. Just kidding. No, anyone, honestly, anyone who's listening who has any questions for us. I know I have a lot of folks in my marketing community who have these questions and they're curious. Shoot me a question, shoot Brad a question. I'll be happy to run it by him. At least from that angle or any angle.
Yeah, and we're definitely open for like questions and answers across cyber too. So if there's something you're thinking about and you'd like us to go more in depth on, stories you come across, things that are happening in your own organization, just feel free to drop that as well, and we can maybe add it to a future episode.
Love it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for the State of Enterprise IT Security Edition, and we'll see you next time.
See you later. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.